For the food fraud tabletop exercise, we'll now move to the second video overview, which is regarding the grant, the aim and scope. So food defense really is a term used to describe the activities associated with protecting the nation's food supply from intentional contamination. And that's a phrase early on, pre-FSMA, that FDA used, the intentional contamination, shifting later to intentional adulteration. FDA has adopted three broad strategies that encompass its food defense activities. First is awareness, second is response, and then is recovery. So these are all three very important, and partially what we're doing here in this tabletop exercise is focusing on awareness building, but also then the coordinated activity for response. When we look at response, what needs to be done, then maybe we also start to identify more details for the recovery. From the award for the project area, there are five key areas identified for this effort. First is an innovative food defense plan integration. So these are activities of how the coordination might happen into that food defense plan. Education and awareness, information dissemination. So exactly what we're doing here, presenting a video, presenting the content, providing it free, and then updating it over time is helping with both that. The project innovatively uses a tabletop exercise to create awareness of EMA and food fraud. And the exercise will also demonstrate how these concepts relate to both food safety and food defense. We cover that throughout the course. This is actually then part of this innovative food defense training to actually provide the training. And one thing we've done is to expand on information technology here, not so much database development, but we focus on information technology and the use of that resource. Vulnerability assessments using FDA's vulnerability assessment software tool. In this course, we did not cover into that. What we're doing here is we're talking about the interaction and the coordination. These assessments will be conducted later under different activities by you or your team. The title and abstract. So develop and implement a food defense tabletop workshop exposing and mitigating the vulnerability of economically motivated adulteration and food fraud incidents. So the development of the content in the tabletop exercise project is relevant to public health and counterterrorism, since increasing the awareness of economically motivated adulteration and food fraud is itself a threat, but also would reduce future opportunities for malicious attacks. And this project leverages theoretical leadership and strong relationships between the MDARD and Michigan State University. The award's specific aims were first to define EMA and food fraud. That's been a real challenge, both the scope and then the responsibilities, where sometimes it's thought that one area is responsible and not another. And this would expand on previous work to address specific questions and present findings. It would also include analysis of the Food Safety Modernization Act, the FDA Working Group on EMA, the WEMA, and recent publications. The second specific aim is to assess how public-private partnership communication action would be optimized. So to go through an actual incident and then take some time to go through a prescribed set of questions to talk about what did happen, what probably would happen, and then what should happen. And what happened in our pilot is there definitely were some new insights, and then different agencies started to talk about those work processes. Specific aim 3 was to increase awareness and optimization of resources through this tabletop exercise for relevant stakeholders. And for broader dissemination, this would include the development of the freebie exercise and also included into our MSU food safety classes, which we have done. Purpose and scope. So it's crucial that we ensure the food products are safe for consumption, obviously. And everyone involved in the food chain, from the farmer through the consumer, has a responsibility to keep the food supply safe. So at any point during production or distribution, food can be contaminated either accidentally, which would end up being a food safety root cause, or on purpose from sabotage or terrorist activities, which would be a food defense with the intent to harm. Intentional contamination also includes food fraud, and food fraud is fundamentally different in addressing the motivation or prevention, because the bad guys are actively seeking to avoid detection. They're not trying to get caught. The purpose scope continued. So Health and Human Services, which is the department over FDA, the Center for Disease Control, USDA's Food Safety Inspection Service, all working with state and local agencies, work closely to safeguard the American food supply. And they continuously seek new ideas and strategies to reduce the incidence of human health incidents and to support food defense-related innovation. The goal here was specifically of this tabletop exercise to provide participants with an overview of what happens at local, state, and federal levels during a food-related incident. We also focus on the role that key personnel play in containing the problem and protecting consumers. So we're looking specifically here at who would you call and what would they do? Or if you got a call, what would you do? Would you know who to call and how to report this? To continue on goals, we're really assessing the plans, policies, and procedures, and to think about how you would realistically apply them in the event of an incident. Think about a situation where you did receive a call, and if you didn't know exactly how to deal with it, what did you do? We want to facilitate discussion among various participants, entities such as local, state, and federal entities, as well as with the private sector. A lot of this communication and the optimization of these responses are across the public-private border there. The objectives themselves are at the conclusion of this tabletop exercise, participants should be able to articulate their specific roles and responsibilities to other professionals in reacting to a discovered food fraud incident. Basically, this is to explain what your role is and how you pass it on, and what's the overall coordination of this across the food supply chain. State the purpose of having multiple agencies assume distinct and sometimes overlapping duties to effectively address and remedy the situation. There's many times where there's confliction, where there's different groups working together, and sometimes information is not known to be shared. And so we're trying to increase that communication. To continue on the objective, to collaborate with a diverse group of responders that may not have worked together before, such as the media, law enforcement, or risk managers. This tabletop exercise can be conducted over again. Now, you don't have as many of the big secrets or twists and turns, but it does allow you to go through and look at those specific situations that we've created to talk about communication. Identify other entities or agencies that are needed to properly address the situation but have not been included on the team yet. Objectives continue. Propose comprehensive, collaborative, and effective ideas, strategies, and solutions to ensure the timely remediation of the discovered food fraud incident. So basically, take the time here to think about how should you interact, both as individuals, and think about your primary functions, the bigger work groups, the overall work groups. Identify the strengths and development needs of their own agencies or departments, and identify the actions they will take to champion the change required to improve or enhance their team's ability to detect and respond to a food fraud incident. A key is that response systems are in place, communication systems are in place. Most likely there will not need to be a new response system, just possibly a question or two more, or even an awareness that this could be something like food fraud, an intentional act, intentional deception for economic gain using food. That's something sometimes that just doesn't fall into the equation yet. The exercise structure, so the exercise is highly interactive, facilitated exercise with 4 learning modules. We'll talk about pre-incident, we'll talk about early incident, so it's a little bit more information, late incident, even additional information, and then the aftermath, and finally a conclusion. The exercise structure, open, low stress, non-public learning environment. So, and this is not intended to set the precedence. We just want to have people talking to each other. And when we say non-public, this is just a private session. It's not a formal statement, a formal interaction, a formal guide. This is just some people getting together to try to work through some of these problems. Listen to and respect the varying viewpoints of all of the participants. Remember, someone else is acting because of some previous direction, insight, awareness. So any response and every response, any gut feel, any insight is something that you need to gather, because we need to understand how each other thinks. Once we understand each other, then we can understand how to communicate with them in between. The scenario is plausible and the events could occur as presented. Now, we did take insight from actual incidents, but then kind of put a few together to make it a little bit more complex. Had to do that just to show some of the additional issues, but it's definitely plausible. Exercise structure continued. Work with each other to provide the expertise needed to ensure that our discussion is accurate and thorough. So as we go through this, and even in the recap, one group may think they see clarity of the world, but you may find out from another group in that discussion that something may not be done quite that way. This is really excellent and really important. We want to find these gaps or inefficient points, and then we can work through them. Commit to applying learnings from today's activities to your job function and sharing key learnings with your colleagues. So come back and see how you might be able to expand your perspective just a little bit sometimes. Just a little bit of awareness to be able to identify or be a little bit more aware that there could be a food fraud incident, and that would then have a different type of response. But it all starts with the very basic same functions. And today's facilitator is not necessarily a subject matter expert, and participants are expected to provide the expertise needed to ensure that our discussion is accurate and thorough. So one thing we've done is provided more background on food fraud, and then what what we'll do is you are experts in your specific area, so go through those. Roles and responsibilities. Participant responds to events based on knowledge and expertise. You don't know everything. You want to explain what you know and what you don't know and where you have questions or gaps. The evaluator records events and captures the essence of the dialogue of best practices. This is someone that's not looking at the process, but also gathering information on how we should respond or major opportunities. The facilitator leads the exercise and moderates the discussions. Continuing the roles and responsibilities, each table should have a discussion leader. So they're a representative from each table, volunteered by the group, who will lead the group as they explore discussions and then the breakout activities. Table recorder, so separate from the discussion leader, someone who represents each table, who will volunteered by the group, who will ensure the group discussions are kept on time and records. Key thing is on time. Keep an update of that and then record what we see as key themes that can be communicated outward. Personal learning inventory. So we define what we're trying to really specifically get out of this. This is designed to improve provide you with a document to capture questions and improvement ideas and action items. That's the presentation, that's the facilitator guide and others. And for your use only, for yourself, capture the personal learning objectives. They're not be collected, but you're encouraged to share your PLIs with others so that you look at what you were trying to get out of this and what you did get out of this. And add your PLI throughout the day and refer back to it as needed. So start this document of what you're looking for. This might seem like an extra task that may not be valuable, but we found this has been very valuable because if you write down, take a moment now to think about what you're trying to get out of it and what your concerns are, what your questions are, then over time you may answer those questions or you may find more questions. With that, we'll take a pause here and then move on to the next video.